I've spent a lot of time sharing some really cool stories of the mission field and talking about all these really great trips that I went on. And I feel like it's now time for me to share about the times when my mission trips weren't so good. Yeah, these ones, they were pretty bad. Hi, hello there. My name is Amanda and I have been on a lot of mission trips. I've been on 10 international mission trips and 2 stateside trips. I started going on mission trips when I was 12. And I have seen some really good trips. I've been a part of some trips that are truly fulfilling the Great Commission of the Therefore Go, baptize, teach, make disciples type of mission trip. And I've also been a part of mission trips that didn't do that. And I just want to tell you guys a couple of stories about some trips and what made those trips not so good. And some of them, the trip itself was just not a God-centered trip. And some of them were just because of my own maturity level. My first ever mission trip was when I was 12. The church that I was going to at the time wanted to take all of their middle schoolers on a mission trip. Now, I'm not against middle schoolers going on mission trips. I think that there needs to be a certain maturity level. In fact, I went on a mission trip last year where there were 2 8th graders who went on the trip with us with their parents. But these students were like really mature in their faith. When I was 12, I was not that way. I was a little brat. I was the typical 12-year-old 7th grade girl who was very insecure, but I couldn't tell anyone that I was insecure because if I did, then people would make fun of me, and it was just a whole thing. Middle schoolers, if you know them, we love them, but they can be a little bit hard to be around at times, and I was that middle schooler. And that year, our church took the entire middle school ministry on a week-long mission trip during spring break, where we went up to our local YWAM base that was hit from really severe storms, and we spent the whole week cleaning up the camp. Now, is there a need for those types of mission trips? Yes. There's absolutely a need to go into an area that has had some pretty major weather or natural disasters that come through. That was not what needed for this trip. Looking back at it now as an adult, that trip was truly just a way to give middle schoolers a service project for a week so we could pat our backs and think of how cool we were for a week. And I remember having a really bad time. Part of it was because I had a really bad attitude going into it because I didn't necessarily want to be there, and I only went because all my friends were going. At home, life was tough. My parents were fighting, and in fact, they were going through a separation, and I could have spent that week with my dad, but I chose to go on the mission trip instead, and I had a lot of mixed feelings about it. And on top of that, our leaders, I remember distinctly them being so annoyed with us, and no one was leading us or guiding us. Now, the YWAM base needed help. It was in pretty bad shape when we showed up, but a bunch of 12 and 13-year-olds are not the ones you need to call to clean up a campus. I appreciate the opportunity, but I also think that it was a really bad choice. I think that it would have been better for me to help out with some sort of VBS-style ministry. YWAM should have had either college students who would probably participate in the program. I know I wasn't ready or mature enough to do something like that where we just spent a week helping out, because then at least I knew what I was getting into, because I had no idea what I was getting into when we went. It was not described to me that we're going to be cleaning all week. So word of the wise, if you're going to take a bunch of middle schoolers on a mission trip, make sure it's a trip where they can actually participate and that you're doing it to serve the local community and pour back into that community. The next mission trip that I went on that was not so good was a mission trip that I had taken when I was a fresh 18-year-old. I just graduated high school. I went to Alaska. Once again, a very similar concept to what that trip was when I was 12. I was going to Alaska. We were going to a really remote village in Alaska on a secluded island, and we were going to help the island clean up after some really severe winter storms came through. This was a little bit more acceptable in my mind because we were in a position where we were older. A lot of us were young adult age. So being outside and knowing that that's the trip I was going on, I was a little bit more prepared to participate in that trip. I remember going on this trip and I just was not spiritually mature enough to handle it. The trip itself was kind of shoddy at best, and I don't want to talk ill about the organization itself. I think that they had a good idea for a trip to get a community of people who have really high mental health issue rates and a lot of unaliving type rates, and sending people there that are going to pour into that community for 3 weeks, clean up their community and give them a better space to be in. it's a good idea. It's good in concept, but the actual execution just wasn't that good. I was dealing with a lot in my life. And at the time, once again, another big thing was happening in my life. My dad had been dealing with a form of cancer. He had been really sick. And so I was really worried the entire trip. So it just wasn't good. So the first 2 trips that I've told you about were times that I was not ready to go on a trip. But this last time was not that experience. This was not a time where I wasn't spiritually ready, but the trip itself was a trip that hurts local communities. And it's the trip that I point to when I tell people that I know what a bad trip looks like, in the sense of like, it is not Christ-centered, it is not rooted in discipleship, that it is not a trip where people have ongoing ministry when I leave. It's definitely one of those trips where we blew in, we blew up, we blew out, and it hurts my heart that I was a part of it. I am grateful that I was a part of that trip so I can talk about it and actually share experience of what that looks like, so I can help people not make that mistake when going on mission trips. But it burdens my heart knowing that that is a trip that a lot of people experience. Not just that specific trip, that style of trip is a very, very prevalent style in Christian missions, which has gained a lot of criticism. And I don't blame the critics. If that's all you see for Christian missions, absolutely, I understand why people don't support it. And so I want to tell you this story. I also want to just give a little bit of a disclaimer that this is not for me to judge the organization we worked with. This is not for me to judge the group that I went with. This is just me talking about an experience in hopes that you will not make that mistake, and you'll be a part of a trip that is a little bit more rooted in discipleship, rooted in long-term care for people that you are ministering to, that there's already ministries there that you were just helping with, that you're not just there and when you go away, the ministry goes away, because ultimately that's the goal. So let me tell you this story. This is also really hard to talk about because, like I said, I don't want to make waves, and I don't want people to feel like I'm necessarily being mean or rude. And I say this with love and grace. This trip was marketed as a Christian mission trip. I had worked for a company which had loose Christian ties, so people called it a Christian company, although the company itself had nothing to do practically with Christianity. It was an organization that was separate from Christianity, but they had Christian undertones when they started the company. That was something that apparently they do every year. They go on a corporate mission trip where they get some of their higher ups and they go on this trip, and they send maybe like 10 or 12 people, and they do a mission project in another country. And so I found out about it. They asked me if I wanted to go and film it, and I was like, absolutely. At that point, I had been on a couple different other mission trips where I had been a videographer. So I already kind of knew, like, that's part of what I want to do for missions. It's not just going and participating, but I get to participate with my camera, and that's a really cool experience. So I was very excited. But some of the things that really started to lead me towards this is just not really rooted in discipleship or long-term care for the community was the fact that just getting there was hard. The struggle that I had with it was that there was no work outside of what we were doing. We were doing a construction style project that very easily could have been and often was done by the local community, and we really just kind of showed up with the material because we paid for it. I felt so incredibly convicted because there were people there that were cussing, and that's something I've talked about, using correct language. There was a lot of separation between the American team and the local team that was there. There was not a lot of crossover. There was not a lot of trying to get to know their culture. When we showed up to do the work, they would often just do the work and get out. There was no prayers, no getting to know the people we were doing the work for. And oftentimes, by the time we showed up, the work was mostly done because the materials would arrive before us. I just remember having this sickening feeling of like, this is volunteerism. This is a way for a bunch of rich white Americans to, pat themselves on the back and say, I did a good thing. And that's what it felt like. Now, this was the only trip that I went on with them. They maybe had a bunch of different experiences, but when I had asked about what happens to the people that we talked to, like, do they get plugged into a local church? Is there a way for them to get help or anything like that? There was no good answer from the ministry we were working with. And they kept saying that we give help to everyone regardless of whether or not they go to church. And I'm all for that. I think that you should help everyone regardless of their Christian or non-Christian affiliation, but you absolutely have to be pointing people to the gospel. And we didn't do that once. And it was just so disheartening to be there and be a part of that. I was so separated from these people because I had been on several mission trips where we had poured into the community, they had poured back into us, and we were helping the mission that already existed. And that's not what happened here. I have no idea what happens to the people that were there. I have no idea what type of Christian experience we gave them. From my understanding, we gave them nothing. We showed up, did a service project for them, and we got out. We didn't share meals with them. We didn't hear their stories. We didn't spread the gospel. We didn't attend to any of their true needs. Yes, the service project helped them with a need that they had, and I believe that that was a good thing to do, but it was not paired with the gospel. We didn't even pray with these people. And it was so sad. If that is your only reference point when it comes to mission work, I get why it's so criticized. But my friends, let me tell you that none of those three experiences are what true mission trips look like, are what true missionary work looks like. True missionary work dives in deep. True missionary work is going to be rooted in the discipleship process. True missionary work is continuing ministries that are already happening locally. Local people doing local ministries, and we just come in and give them extra hands and extra support. And because I've had these experiences where it was not that, I'm able to confidently sit here and tell you that it is so worth being a part of the trips that do the right thing, that are truly focused on the gospel, but also meeting practical needs. Thank you so much for watching this video. I was a little bit vulnerable and it made me uncomfy. But if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I could have trash talked those mission trips if I wanted to, but I really didn't want to talk so bad about the trip and just point out flaws that I saw. And I would love to hear stories about good mission trips that you've been on. Please fill me with encouragement. What are times that you've been a part of a mission trip or mission work that was good, that you saw actual practical good happening in your community or in the international mission field? I would love to hear those stories. I also want to encourage you, if you would like to subscribe, go ahead and do that, because not only am I going to be talking about mission trips, I'm going on one soon. So with this mission trip that I'm about to go on, I have a lot of stories that will be coming out of that, and so I want to share those with you. But I also have other content talking about the Great Commission, Bible studies, Bible journal flip throughs, all the fun stuff. So go ahead and subscribe for more content, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye!